everyone, thanks for clicking on today's video. My name is Sissy and I love arts and crafts and sharing my silly thoughts on random things. I love candles, and if you ask my husband, I have too many, but I promise you I don't have enough. It's difficult for me to pass up candles and not go home without one. I like to think that I'm giving it a good home, and I do burn them, I do. I don't just let them pile up in my hallway closet that is almost exclusively filled with candles. Basically, having the amount of candles I do have led me to wanting to recycle the little bit I have in the end of each candle and use it up again. So here we are. We are candle making today, or at least attempting to candle make today. Maybe upcycling candles is a better phrase than actual legit candle making. I'd love to do legitimate candle making, but maybe that'll be for another day. I like the idea of recycling what I have, and I have many empty candle containers and even more candle containers with just teeny bit of wax left in them, enough for me to say that it'd be a shame just to get rid of it. So I went and I got some candle wicks, an old pot I'm no longer using in the kitchen, and we're going to attempt this. Can't be that hard, right? I used a kettle to heat up water and pour it into the old candle jars to separate the remaining wax from the container and make it easier to get out. Then, to clean the jars, I used soap and warm water, and if I couldn't get the old labels off, I used Goo Gone. Then I hot glued new candle wicks in, got some of those tongue depressors with holes in them for the wicks to sit through and not knock over when I poured the new wax in. Now, between you and me, I admit that I might have made a mistake here. I used the old pot and melted down all the remaining wax to create some new candles. I had originally thought about adding essential oils for the smell, but some of the candles still retain strong scents, especially the ones from Bath and Body Works and Trader Joe's. I'm not sure if it was the best idea to combine all the scents into one, especially since the scents ranged from fresh, clean scents to dark and woodsy to sweet and spicy. The combination of everything was interesting, to say the least. The scents that took over were the hot cocoa scent from Bath and Body Works and the honey crisp apple from Trader Joe's. The rest of the scents ended up being kind of muddled into the mix. If I had thought about it for more than a few seconds, I may have either separated the scents so I could get a couple of small candles with scents that were close together, or I wonder if I had added the essential oils if I could put in enough to make that the foreground. I don't know. I'll have to experiment with that more in the future. Although I enjoy a variety of candle scents, I think my favorites are the fresh and clean scents, like the bright florals that aren't too flowery, if that makes sense, and the scents that typically say like ocean breeze or fresh linen. I think I feel that way about air fresheners and soaps too. However, especially during the holidays, I enjoy the rich, deep scents like the fresh baked pies or winter spices. I've heard that some people also use the jars for other things like tiny plants or holders for random office or kitchen supplies or things like that. Anyway, there's an absolute coziness to candle and soap making. It makes me happy. Even though it's and until everything cools, becomes lovely, the smell can be questionable. But I do enjoy it. Today's topic is part two of what I think will be a little series talking about RV trips with my family when I was a kid, as I have a lot of stories to share. I have so many fond memories of driving in our family RV. We had a beautiful Class A Coachman RV with a lovely blue green interior, light colored cabinets, a sofa and table and chairs that turned into beds, and lots of storage. Although there were moments where we needed time away from each other, there's only so far one can go as siblings in a small space. We had ample moments to stretch our legs at rest stops and explore campgrounds. My brothers and I would take turns picking out an exercise to do when we went to rest stops. We would do things like jump rope, hopscotch, and if we were in an area that was safe enough, like we weren't going to get run over by other vehicles in the parking lot, we would run the length of the RV and race. My brothers and I were homeschooled, so when we were traveling in the RV, we would often be doing schoolwork, and my mom would create different worksheets depending on the state we would drive through, which were some of my favorite activities. We would point out things we would see that were unique to the geography, or we would look up historic facts about the state, or if we had time, we would stop at historic locations and tour them, which were always fun. When we were done with schoolwork, we had a lot of board games we would play, or if we were really well behaved, we would get to play our Game Boys for a while. If there were ever a time when my dad was getting tired, my mom would have us all ask him quote unquote tough questions, basically the hardest math questions we knew, which weren't very hard, or we would quiz him on things we learned that day. My dad has never been much of a talker, so we had to get creative to keep him engaged. As a family, we learned through our travels that there were some places that were awesome to check out and explore, and other places that maybe we should avoid. To get to Disney World from the West Coast, as a lot of our trips consisted of that particular route, we would almost always take the 10. For those of you familiar with the US, the 10 is a freeway that stretches from coast to coast, and you can get through, I think, all of the southern states at the very least with the 10, and I actually think you can go through a fair amount of the East Coast as well. Basically, it's a thoroughfare that's pretty important to the country. We would see countless trucks that are bringing goods across America, and then we would see things specific to the area. Like, for example, we would often see large trucks with big horse trailers driving by in the middle of Texas. Because we often drove down the 10, we would often stay in the same location/cities for our overnight stays or breaks. Some of these cities we love staying in, like Biloxi, Mississippi, which was absolutely the cutest little city that we enjoyed staying in often before Katrina hit, which is really sad to think about. One city that we try to avoid if possible, and would to this day, is El Paso, Texas. Now, I like Texas. Texas is the halfway state, the state that goes on for days, the state that, if we only drive 400 to 500 miles a day, can take 3 entire days to cross. Texas is the state where once you get past El Paso, there's not a whole lot until you get to the other side when you hit Houston area. The problem is, we would have to stop at El Paso because, especially if we had driven from Arizona that morning, we would have gone a fair amount of miles at that point, and my dad would be really tired. If we chose to bypass El Paso, we would have had to drive nearly another day's worth of driving before we hit another place. My dad tried it once or twice, but it was grueling for everyone. So, unfortunately, we would often have to stay in El Paso. Now, El Paso isn't the worst place on the planet. I've been to other cities in the US where I have felt unsafe, and I think there can be picturesque spots in El Paso. The problem is, at least when we traveled, the RV camps were pretty much on the border of Texas and Mexico, and the areas were questionable, to put it lightly. When it got dark, we often heard people screaming and gunshots going off around the campsite. Essentially, we did our best to make camp before sunset and only have dinner in the RV at night. I remember there was one time I don't really remember why, but I think this was unplanned or we were late getting out or something. But we had planned to be in Florida by Christmas Eve so that we could spend Christmas at Disney World. However, something happened, like work related for my dad or family related for my mom, that we couldn't even start driving to the other side of the country until very late in December, and we ended up spending Christmas Eve in El Paso, Texas. I remember we got to a sketchy little campground where there was literally no one around and filled with what looked like completely abandoned RVs and trailers. There wasn't a single soul, but the campground was surrounded by a brick wall, so we thought we might be okay. There was a teeny tiny little booth in the middle of the campground that had a sign saying, "Stay the night, pay with cash in an envelope through the slot." So I guess an honor system? We really weren't sure. But we decided let's set up camp as it was getting dark and hunker down for the night. For those of you who don't know, an RV campground at its simplest is typically a sand lot filled with rectangle spaces for RVs and trailers, and they have hookups or connections to connect your vehicle to utilities like water, sewer, and electricity. This was also in the early days, so Wi Fi routers and internet hookups were rare or non existent. I remember my dad and I quickly set up camp when we pulled into a space while my mom got dinner ready with the boys, and it was spooky. We started hearing the noises of El Paso around the wall, and as my dad and I looked around, there was still not a single sign of a human being in any of the trailers and RVs surrounding us. We hurried and practically jumped into the RV where we locked the door tight and closed all the curtains, which we didn't always do as we like to look out at the scenery. I saw that my little brothers had set up our teeny tiny Christmas tree we traveled with, and it looked pretty, glowing in the soft light of the RV. We had peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for Christmas Eve and whispered quietly to each other because we still weren't really sure where we were and whether it was safe. My family has a tradition where we open one gift per person on Christmas Eve, and we very quietly did that sitting on the floor of the RV. We had fun though and went to bed early. In the morning, my mom and I got up first, and when the sun started to rise, we quickly went out to the campground bathroom to shower and change. I remember being extremely apprehensive, but my mom did not want to get ready in the RV, so I was terrified as we made our way over to the campground bathroom. The RV shower was pretty little, so if we could, we would try to take advantage of the campground shower, but I didn't really think it was worth it. My mom was determined, though. The water surprisingly worked in the stalls, so the bathroom itself looked, well, used and ancient. It looked like there hadn't been anyone there in a long time, so I personally didn't risk using the toilets. The shower water was ice cold, so my mom and I took seconds in our showers and practically ran back to the RV as it was also cold outside. I know that Texas is hot in the summer, but in the winter it can be freezing. Then we packed up as quickly as we could, and because my father is an extremely honorable man, put the cash, which I don't remember the cost, but I remember my parents remarking that was really expensive for a campground. Keep in mind, we still did not see a single soul at this place. My dad put the cash in an envelope and slipped it through the door slot in that creepy little hut in the middle of the campground, and we left. That was definitely a memorable Christmas for my family. Did you ever spend a holiday in a unique place, and how did you like it? I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for listening. Please like and subscribe. Have an amazing day, and I'll talk to you again soon.